Hi, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Clare Morell, the author of The Tech Exit. This is Cynthia, the founder of ScreamLessPlayMore.com. And Clare is going to help debunk one of the biggest myths that I always hear. People say, well, if my kids don't have gaming or social media right now, they're just going to binge on it when they get out of the house or get to college. And Clare helps us understand why that is actually not true. She also is going to tell us about what different states are doing in terms of laws and policies to keep kids safe online. She is a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and the director of its Technology and Human Flourishing project. So she really knows a lot about the policy side of this. So let's dive back into part 2 of my conversation with Clare Morell. There's this myth that people have that if kids don't have phones and social media now, they're going to binge when they're off on their own. And why is this a myth?
Yes, this is my favorite myth to debunk because I hear this a lot as the kind of pushback for why they gave the kid a smartphone. And all the families I spoke to, they were like, it was the exact opposite because kids, the ages of 0 to 18 are so habit forming. We are laying a foundation for them for the rest of their lives. And they formed all their key habits without being dependent on a smartphone. Like they learned to navigate life in the real world without a phone. And so when they eventually did get it in college, they were much better able to self-regulate themselves of like, oh, I'm on my phone too much, because there was like this cognitive dissonance that they had where they knew the experience of life and they knew this version of themselves without the phone that really always served as a tether for them. And so I interviewed some of these college students and they were like, I actually realized I was on my phone too much. And so I scaled back and I deleted these apps, and they were aware of this themselves. And this one boy was telling me, in comparison to his friends, he only had maybe 50 pickups of his phone a day, which was the iPhone metric, how many times you check your phone. But his friends didn't even realize it. They had over 250 times a day they're picking up their phone. And he said they couldn't even see it in themselves. It was like second nature because they had grown up with the phone. And so I think just one mom said, little video gamers grow up to be big video gamers, and your habits are formed so much as a child. So just this idea that they're going to binge and go crazy later, it's really the opposite. They've formed their habits without it. It just has a lot less appeal and desire for them. And then even if they do get on it, they're kind of quickly able to realize, I'm using this too much. Let me kind of scale back my use. And so, but the other important thing I highlight, and the reason that the binging myth is debunked in this chapter, is that all these families really took time and proactively trained and educated their kids on the reasons that they were doing this, on educating them on the harms they were trying to protect them from, so that the kids really came to own that and embrace that themselves. And so one mom was saying, they watched the documentary The Social Dilemma with her teen boys, and they were just so repulsed that the social media industry
that thing is
trying to
so good.
Oh, yeah. Is this trying to manipulate them in their behavior. And so she said when they went off to college, they did end up getting a smartphone, but they had no interest in getting on social media at all because they had been, raised in a home that kind of taught them about it. And so I do think the explaining, the educating of our kids and exemplifying for them our own kind of wise technology use as parents is the best way to train them for using it well as an adult. Rather than giving them the phone, a tool that's too powerful for them before they're ready to handle it, the best way we train them for how we'd want them to use it as adults so they don't go binge and go crazy later is really by educating them and then modeling ourselves as adults the way we'd want our kids to use their phones when they're adults. So I think about that a lot as a parent. It's very convicting. You're like, is me being on my phone right now? Is that how I'd want my kid using it? And just kind of asking those questions of ourselves. So that's what that whole chapter is about.
Yeah, and how you are being an example. And one thing that Emily Turkin has said is just live out loud. And when you're on your phone, you say like, oh, I'm making a grocery list like right now.
Yes.
I'm checking the map, whatever it is, so that they don't just think you're like mindlessly scrolling. You're actually explaining to them what you're doing if you have to be on your phone in front of your kids.
That's such a
So,
great principle. Yeah, I love that.
well,
I always say that, narrate what you're doing. I also try to opt to make more phone calls than sending texts. I mean, because I
that's
grew up
smart.
hearing my mom talk on our landline phone, and I feel like that's even kind of how I absorbed phone etiquette.
That's
And
true.
so there's
That's
just
true.
there's things I'm intentionally thinking about modeling for my kids and just making those decisions, like narrating what you're doing or having an actual phone call instead of just back and forth texts.
Yeah, I think about that when if I'm on speakerphone with the doctor's office or the pharmacy or something, I realize like, oh, this is them learning how do you talk to other people? How do you make appointments? How do you ask questions of strangers?
Life skills. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, part of this, the FEA, the A is adopt alternatives. And so if you're not going to be using some of this technology, you need to do some alternatives. And, I remember what the world used to be like. We had landlines. We wrote letters. We played outside. We had paper maps. So if you do a tech exit, I mean, in some ways, is the way to do it sort of going back to the 90s?
It is. I mean, in some ways, it is kind of going old school. I will say, though, there's some differences in that now. We actually have some really good technologies that have been invented just in the last several years as alternatives to the smartphones. Because I often get the comment, oh, just get them a dumb phone. And I'm like, yeah, but it's actually like the options are better than that. They're not purely dumb phones. They have more functionality, like genuine tools that I think have come about because of the smartphone era, like GPS or other, things on your phone that's genuinely a tool for you to use. A lot of these alternatives allow kids to have those kinds of tools, but without social media apps, without an internet browser or any gaming apps, anything that's going to make the phone distracting or addicting to them. So I recommend a lot of those options like the Pinwheel phone, the Gabb phone, the Wisephone, the Bark phone are all like really good options. And in some cases can even be a better option than a dumb phone. I've had parents recently explain to me, like, if you go to Verizon, even the kind of dumbest flip phone now often has YouTube like automatically installed and like an internet browser. And you're like, I mean, it's obviously very clunky to navigate on the flip phone, but they're trying to even integrate these internet kind of functionalities to even dumb phones. So I just always caution parents. I'm like, you want to make sure it's truly dumb. And so some of these alternatives that were actually invented to be like a child safe alternative phone, like the Pinwheel phone that's very customizable and controlled by the parents. You can program it to only be allowed to access certain contacts, if you want to pre-approve who they can text or call, and approve what kinds of apps they can download or not. And again, with like no access to an internet browser, social media apps, I find a lot of parents like those better because they feel like they are in a lot more control. And so the principle I kind of explained in the book is that these families, honestly, they delayed that age of first phone as long as possible until the child was truly needing like a communication tool because they're now moving around independently. And then they opted for one of these alternatives. Because I also always caution parents, even on these alternative phones, like texting can still be pretty addicting, which most of the alternative phones have. And especially group texts, like group text can lend itself to dynamics similar to social media. So I always kind of give those caveats that even with these alternatives, just parents being mindful of that and having restrictions around the phone too, like no phones in bedrooms and, maybe they can check the text a couple times a night at home, but just still not having this attitude of the phone being constantly on your person, I think is also important, even with those alternatives.
So even with the alternative phones, you as a parent can't just go on cruise control and think, oh, this is totally fine. You still need to be aware of what they're doing on the phone.
I think it's important to still have boundaries and accountability and all that transparency between parent and child so that you're ensuring that they really are protected.
Well, you list a lot of these phone alternatives in the back of your book. You have really great resources at the end of the book. And I have to be honest that the next time I need some sort of an upgrade, I am seriously considering doing one of these alternatives just for myself.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to be so much less addictive. And if I can't do Instagram or something, then I can still do it on my computer. And I probably should be doing that anyway, because then I won't be tempted to glance and see like, oh, how's that one post doing? And if I were on my computer, it's a lot easier to say to my kids, oh, I'm doing work.
You know,
Yeah,
they can
you
see
can
the
see
screen.
it.
Yep.
And you're not tempted to do it just some random time. You're like, okay, I am sitting down now
To
at
pull
the
out my
laptop.
computer. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. No, I fully support parents doing this. And yeah, I made the switch, I think 2 years ago now to, I have one of the alternatives called a Wisephone. I love it. I mean, that's its own whole podcast episode, my experience going to the Wisephone, but it's been great. It has all the tools I need, and anything else I do at my computer. So I do think it's possible for adults. And I do think like even that example is really powerful for a child. And I talk about this, I think in the Adopt Alternatives chapter, that what stood out to me in all these families is they kind of rejected this premise of the inevitability of a smartphone, kind of even acknowledging like these things aren't even great for adults. And so it's not like, oh, when you become an adult, once you reach this magic age, you get a smartphone. They were like, we didn't want the smartphone to be like the marker for adulthood. We wanted to make that more like real life experiences and privilege that they would get to have when they matured. But to try to kind of even just not assume that a child, even as an adult, would need a smartphone, because now there are so many better alternatives available.
Well, yeah, there was a great story in your book when you're talking about the T part of Feast of trading screens for real life responsibilities and pursuits, about this boy, and they had promised him he would get a phone his senior year, and then they realized he just was not ready for it, and they said no, and of course he got so mad. But can you tell us the story of what they decided to give him instead?
This was like one of my favorite stories in the whole book, because it just was something about it was just so sweet and like so empowering. So the family, like these parents, they were kind of talking about the challenges with like, oh my goodness, we gave him a smartphone. This was a bad decision. We've just realized this, but he's only in like a week or two into having this phone. And they're talking to their like the boy's uncle, and he says, I want to offer him the use of this like family legacy truck, like Uncle Gene's famous like kind of old red farm school truck, if he gives the smartphone up and goes back to an alternative. And so then the parents kind of presented this idea to their son, and they sold it to him as like, hey, this truck would actually give you a lot of real world freedom and independence, and would be much better a marker of like real responsibility and adult maturity than the phone. And, you know, the boy was like, okay, like he was really honestly like, yeah, like this offer of a truck is awesome. And then he started a moving business with his younger brother and made a bunch of money that summer. And the dad was just like, it was a really empowering experience for him to have that truck, have that real world independence, this taste of responsibility as an adult. And it really helped make it easier to give up the smartphone. And then with time, he came to recognize, you know, wow, that phone really did have a kind of weird power over me. And kind of in going off to college, he was really unsure whether or not he would get one. The parents kind of said, we're not going to buy it, but if you want to buy a phone for yourself when you go off to college, you can. And he honestly was like, I'm kind of unsure, because I did feel the addictive effect that it had on me. And so, yeah, I think it can be really powerful as parents if we are taking like a privilege, like the way the smartphone has become such a privilege away in the online world, trying to actually replace that with something really meaningful and empowering to our kids in the real world can be really helpful.
I love that story. I think that's great. So transitioning to the companies, I feel like we cannot expect these companies to do the right thing, because they are making money hand over fist, and they're just not going to change their ways. And I don't think it's fair for the parents to constantly be the ones that have to police all of this. So it really kind of lands on our laws.
Yeah.
And so I know you're really involved in legislation. And so you read in the book about this amazing piece of legislation that passed in Louisiana in 2023 that verifies the age of users. And since it passed, the traffic that goes to Pornhub has dropped by 80%, which is amazing. And so it's Louisiana, so it looks like it's called the LA Wallet. So how does that technology work
Yeah, no, this is great. So, yeah, I've been very involved in these state efforts to pass legislation to ensure that adult websites, pornography websites, are age restricted so that kids, particularly just kids accidentally clicking on these links through social media, can't actually immediately get sucked into all this very pornographic, obscene, often extremely violent content on these websites. And so Louisiana really led the way. They were the first state to pass it. And what made their experience so unique and so effective is they had already adopted this LA Wallet program, which is this digital ID associated with a driver's license in the state. So only adults can kind of have these, the driver's license or the wallet, but it's more that what the program that was already set up, basically, the LA Wallet then knows that whether or not you're over or under 18 based on your digital ID. And so it can then just relay to a website that you're trying to access. So they actually do this for alcohol purchases in Louisiana. And now for pornography websites, you can just click a link that says, I have LA Wallet, and it's like an app on your phone. And it basically just sends a prompt, and you click in the app and you enter the verification code proving it's you, and it lets you into the website. And what it does is it's very privacy protecting for adults who are concerned about that. And so it kind of eliminates a lot of the First Amendment concerns about these laws because no other information, your name, nothing about you is actually transferred to the website, just a signal. Yes, this person is above 18, or no, they're not.
Okay.
And so it would be nearly impossible. I mean, if you're a 16-year-old and you get a driver's license, then the LA Wallet still knows that you're under 18. And if you're an under 18-year-old and you don't have LA Wallet, there's just absolutely no way for you to access the website. So it's very effective. It's very fast. It's like a 30-second process, and it's very privacy protecting for adults. And so I get a lot of pushback about all these kind of policy solutions to say, oh, this can be so hard for adults, or we don't have the technology to do this. And my answer is just, we absolutely have the technology to do this. These companies are incredibly powerful. They can figure out a solution. And the reality today is just that parts of the online world are not safe for kids in the same way that we're able to distinguish between adults and children in the real world. We have to be able to do that online. And now there are actually methods for age verification that are privacy protecting for adults, but also effective at keeping kids away from portions of the internet that we don't want them to be accessing. And so those are some of the policy solutions I work on.
So you would basically just get this app and pretty much like load your driver's license into it, and then that
now,
is just so genius.
I think some of the tech companies are seeing the writing on the wall that a lot of these solutions are coming. And so Apple themselves is basically now offering this to all Apple users, that you can just get a digital ID through your Apple Wallet, and they'll have an app that just helps verify your age if you're trying to access age-restricted things online. And so it definitely doesn't need to be unique to Louisiana. They had just happened to kind of pilot this program, but now other states are following suit. Tech companies are trying to make this easy on users by offering these services that are anonymous, privacy protecting, and are extremely fast for the user, taking, a fraction of amount of time to do this.
In theory, like if I had a 16-year-old and they got a phone, could I use that Apple Wallet thing to give them a digital ID, and then that would block 18 and up websites for them?
Yeah, I would need to look into it more, but there's lots of solutions because they're actually also trying to basically allow parents to configure a device for a child where the parent says, this child is not, yet 18 or not yet 16 or not yet 13. And then the account is actually linked to a parent's. And then the parent has to consent to any kind of app download or any kind of thing that they would be trying to access. So for minors who might not have a form of ID yet, like a license, it would allow the parent to kind of configure the device that way and link it to the parent's device. And then for other users who do start to get some type of identification, that could all just be configured on the device. And then the device should then, knowing the age, make sure that the experience of the child on the device is safe, that they're not able to access porn websites or other apps, gambling apps. There's all sorts of like adult apps in the App Store, 17 and up, then they wouldn't, have access to that. So I think I keep pushing for these things through law because I'm like, the tech companies can do this. They could make this a very easy user experience if they were really compelled to do it. And because it's all about the business incentives, but the technology is there and they could make this so much easier on parents if they were really required to. And so those are the kinds of solutions that I'm working on so that it's just by default, these things are set up to be safe for a kid. And then, for an adult, then no problem. You're clearly over 18 and you can do what you want on the device. So, yeah.
So if you had a magic wand, what national legislation would you like to see take effect to keep kids safe?
So many things. The first would be to see that pornography websites are age restricted across the nation, not just in individual states, because right now it's a little bit of a patchwork. I also would really love for Congress to actually just raise the age of social media. It has been 13 by default because of a 1998 law well before social media, not related to social media, that just said you can't collect children's data if they're under 13 without parental consent. So the social media companies obviously were not wanting to have to comply with those regulations. Yeah. And so they just made the default age 13 so they wouldn't have to deal with parents, but it's much too young. I mean, we just have so much evidence of how harmful this is. So the country of Australia has raised the age of 6 to 16 in Australia. Denmark has recently raised it to 15. And I think we would help all parents out if there was just a higher national age for social media so that this didn't have to be this individual battle between all the parents where they're like, all my friends are on Snapchat. We would just be like, no, totally. None of your friends are on Snapchat. Yeah. Like, this is a collective solution. And so, and it helps basically combat some of those things I was talking about, just that unfortunately the harms of social media and smartphones are not just individual. It has these group level dynamic effects where if everyone is on the Snapchat app, even if your kid is not, they can still experience some of the detriments of that app because the other kids are on it and it changes the social environment. So collective solutions that would just raise the age would really help all parents out and really protect all of our kids from not just the individual harms of these addictive social media apps, but the group level harms as well, kind of introduced by these being part of a tween or teen's social environment. So those would be my big two things that I would want to see.
Oh, I hope those can happen. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yes. Well.
The last question I love to ask everybody ties into this because we need more independence and responsibility for our kids, especially if they're not going to be on devices. What's one of your favorite memories that you can think of from childhood when you were just allowed to do something without parents or without grown-ups telling you what to do?
Oh, that's such a good question. Honestly, my siblings and I just playing outside and my parents not really knowing exactly where we were or what we were doing. And my mom actually just had a dinner bell on the side of our house that she would ring when it was time to come home. Because we lived on the kind of end of a dirt road and we'd ride our bikes up and down the road or go to our neighbor's house and play in their yard or play out in our field in the woods behind our house. And so I just have lots of memories of just, running around with my siblings unsupervised, but knowing, my mom's right there inside the house if we needed something. But that was just so good for us. It was good for our sibling relationships. We just invented all sorts of crazy games and came up with things.
That's great. How can everybody get in touch with you and find out more about your work?
Oh, yes, please. So the techexit.com is where you can find the book, but also resources to go with the book. I always want parents to know there is a discussion guide there to read through with other parents. There's also a Tech Exit checklist, which is just a very simple 2-pager PDF summarizing the FEAST acronym and kind of the really core kind of quick takeaways from the book so you kind of remember them and have a little reference sheet. And then there's also a screen-free activities tip sheet if you're doing a detox, kind of here are things you can do with your kids at these different ages instead, just to give some inspiration to parents. I know we're all busy and tired and sometimes you're just lacking in creativity. So those resources are all at the techexit.com. You can also buy the book there. And then I have a Substack, claremorell.substack.com, where I try to put out new resources and articles for parents, especially on emerging issues. So my latest post was about AI and the impacts AI is having on kids. So I really try to continue continue to put out resources related to the book and my policy work at claremorell.substack.com. You can subscribe there. And then all of my kind of work in the policy space, every article I've written, if you're interested in diving deeper into those types of details, is all at eppc.org. That's the think tank I work for. You can just find my scholar page, and it has everything collected in one place for you to read through.
Well, I'm really excited to look more into your Substack, and I highly recommend the book for everybody. So thank you so much for talking to me.
Yes, thank you for having me on. It was a really fun conversation.
If this episode was helpful, tap follow so that you don't miss the next conversation. Thank you so much for listening to Screen Less, Play More and being part of the community. We really appreciate it.